So hi, my name is Avi Friedman. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Kentik, a network traffic intelligence and analytics company. I'm going to talk now a little bit about what people do with some of the performance and security use cases. We didn't start the company directly targeting the people that run applications on the performance side or the network security folks, even though that's some of the history. But we always designed the system to be able to take that, and a lot of our customers start using it for those things. This is also an area of roadmap for us, so I'm curious what people are seeing and thinking as they talk to people about how they do these kinds of things. How many people have heard in the last year, is the problem in the network? Is it the network? All right, so I won't ask last week. We don't want to embarrass any non-practitioners. So this is something that's been the case forever. And as I mentioned in the intro section, we deal with an awful lot of people who really, really want to know quickly and accurately and are not trying to finger point. They really want to know and not bug their peers. And this may seem unbelievable, but even the app people not wanting to bug the network people, this just doesn't help anybody. They just want that data. They want it in their tools. They want everything to be linked together. But first step is get data. In some vendors speak, when they say congestion, they mean is the link is full. That's like the port is full. Congestion, you can't really tell. For an application owner, is there retransmits and things like that? You can't tell from SNMP. Where is the performance problem that a user is experiencing? You need a little bit more data than typically what NetFlow will provide. Very difficult even to get great throughput data from just sampled flow, or S-flow, even more accurately than NetFlow, but sampled, still very difficult. So you got to get data. You have to have a system that can parse it, so you take those IPFix templates or wherever you're getting the data from, and then you need to be able to make it usable by those other groups and integrate with other tool stacks. So that's a high level. And for us, as I mentioned before, we've done some work taking data from nprobe, and we have some ideas of other things that we will take data from. And so again, the first step is you need to get the data.
It's alive.
Love short circuit.
Input.
More input. So that is, I apologize that it is not, chrome-breasted input eaters. So I think that was in number 2, and he's parachuting in. So we were having an arguing on a different Twitter thread about which was real science, weird science, Revenge of the Nerds, or Short Circuit, like the Uber, geek movie of the era. So what's interesting is, to condense a longer conversation, there's actually a lot of places that already live in the network infrastructure from which you can get data, some of which is already in broadly speaking NetFlow, if you count IPFix as NetFlow. How many people have used some of the performance data that comes out of Cisco AVC? Now, that is just IPFix templates. Or maybe it's NetFlow v9. I consider them the same thing. One of them has a vendor ID and the other doesn't. And that's on some of the platforms and generally more enterprise and service provider, but you can use that and get MOS scores, RTT, jitter loss. I apologize for spelling error, Citrix AppFlow. That's the old NetScalers. Have TCP RTT, HTTP request method, Nginx logs. Nginx can peer into the kernel's TCP info struct and get TCP timers, bytes, packets, and do it on a per session basis. So in our view, looking at stuff from the wire and recomputing it often actually misses things. You're going to see this big persistent connection, but if you're not decrypting it, you'll know the site, you'll be able to estimate the time to first byte, but not of every transaction. So we really, again, think of it as where are all the places that you can get the data. If you're interested in security, well, Bros or Arcata Snort, you know what? Splunk doesn't let you aggregate by prefix. It doesn't do some of these kinds of BGP templating views. We're not designed to let you do truly fast, high resolution, find any regex of anything. You could do that with our system. That's not what we're designed for. But for a network nerd view, there's already sometimes instrumentation. Why not piggyback on that? Again, you don't have to deploy $300,000 appliances everywhere for each group. So to start with, NTOP and NProbe, eventually we'll do some other things. We'll give people the ability to map specific templates like some other tools have. The way we store it, Ian talked about this a little bit, is whatever columns we get live on the file system. They live in the schema. If they're not there, they don't. So again, we're not too fussy about that, but the system's designed to be pretty easy to get that data. And to skip some time, if we have time, I'll go back in, but we used to look only at retransmits. Now we can look at client latency, server latency. I could show you, except that would violate our NDAs, but we use show us customers by client latency of the TCP sessions for the net flow, the K flow that's inside the SSL, and then say, oh, we need to fix that. Like, that's not an issue on our end, and then we can plot that on top of and see the intermediate ASs and say, oh, it's level 3. I don't want to pick on my friends at level 3, but we'll say AS -1, or 64512. How about that? 64512 is having a problem, and then be able to go deal with that. So we've already found the ability to do that useful, but we had to, in that case, we put the agent on our server and then treat that as an exporter, and that's how we get that data. Eventually, being able to get that from more different kinds of things, we think will be very interesting. And metrics, as I mentioned, I don't think you can really look at the whole world from the packet view. I don't think you can really look at the whole world from application instrumentation. You certainly can't look at it just from CPU, IOPS, and bytes in and out. You really need to take it all and put it together. And if I had infinite resources, maybe we'd have our own metric system, but for now it's about integration. We do have the ability, because Mr. Pai wrote it, we have a Postgres foreign data wrapper for getting metrics. So we actually can do queries that reach out and combine the flow data with external metrics. But sometimes, again, we just have people that are focused on the application say, here's the network piece. Just pull here and get the network piece. Starting with Grafana, we've tried to partner with some of the metrics folks who've said, oh, no, we're going to compete with you. And I said, good luck. You're taking all the NetFlow data in and processing it, but we'll see you, at some point. And at some point, I think where we're going to get into it is the streaming telemetry. So I don't think we're going to build the solution for per microsecond, what were the fans doing in your switch. But if you think about what Ian talked about with the data unification architecture that we have, I really badly want to pull out of that the queue depth, like we do from BGP, maybe on a 1 second TTL, so that as the flow comes in, we can look at what the maximum queue depth for that period of time was everywhere that we get the flow. And if we have it, that's awesome. If we don't have it, that's awesome. That's okay. And then in that world, again, we think we'd be a consumer. There'd be other consumers, Kafka, yay, whatever your bus is. So I think we're going to do some things in that realm and watch where that is. This is interestingly an area where, like some of the network performance, a lot of our customers don't even know that it's possible. Don't even know you can do a protobuf on Juniper or whatever the Cisco is. So I think there'll need to be some education, nanog talks, things like that. And then I think that'll be an intermediate. Again, like there's full packet over here, there's NetFlow v5 here. Being able to instrument everything at the packet level, we can see a lot of performance data for TCP at least. But again, let's say it's not TCP, let's say it's a protocol I don't know, it's a gaming protocol. I can still get data from queue depth on the switches that we think could be interesting. Security is also an interesting thing. And it's an area where people typically have very different solutions for. There's typically the SIM, which is the machine that goes bing, off in the corner. Often there's intelligent watching of it. Usually it's just sorted by something and then we'll look at it as we have time. But has anyone worked with Landcope? That's a solution that takes enhanced flow data. Okay, it does some kind of stitching that we don't do yet, but fundamentally it looks a lot the same. In fact, our first customers wanted something that was full resolution over years. We try not to argue with people that want to store too much for too long. That's just, you can't argue with people that have been trained that's what they need to do. Fine. Why should that be a separate system? Shouldn't that be the same thing? So That's something we're looking at. Today, we deal mostly with volumetric DDoS attack. That's what the alerting system mostly does. But as we get more metadata, we think that we'll be able to do more on the attack side. WAF data, people like Radware that we're already working with, let's get their ADC logs. That's got some performance. Let's get their WAF logs. That's got some of the security side. Multi-tenancy, this is an area where we were most concerned that the SOC will say, tell me everything this IP address did for the last 5 years at full resolution, and then the system will go. So we really want to rate limit those queries, make them execute fast, but today, actually, they'll never execute at what we would call full speed, because again, we want to, if we fall down on knock views and DDoS alerting, our customers will get upset. So these are some things that we're working on. It's funny because security is a bigger market. In fact, the performance analytics is even a bigger market than this. OpNet of old, Arbor, FlowTrack, the space that we've chosen to attack. But as long as we do it in a sequenced fashion, we think we can wind up with practitioner-friendly stuff in these areas that can be pulled together. Definitely interested for feedback about what people have seen and what some of the market holes are there. If we had a ton more time, I would show you, but I'm happy to give anyone that's interested a demo. What we do today for security is mostly taking the threat feeds. Today, they're relatively smaller, as Ian mentioned, programmed in via API. We're building something that'll look more like the BGP system, so you could have hundreds of thousands or millions of entries in a routing table, basically, but it turns into a threat feed. And then, of course, the forensics. Big difference between security and ops. Security often wants unsampled flow. That can be a lot of data, and that's an area where you get a little bit more towards on-premise. Our view is always have some sort of regional clusters at least. Keep the PCAP at the edge, but the metadata in the middle. ProtectWise would disagree. They say PCAP to the cloud. Everything is getting encrypted, so I don't know how well, how you do that. But the metadata we've seen work really well at one location, or for really big companies, sometimes they'll have it continentally. Security drives a little bit more of that locality because the volumes can go up. And the key is making the system work well, even with that high resolution for the operations use case. And on the performance side, roadmap is really, as I mentioned, working with where are the interesting sources of data. So I'm really curious what you guys have seen. What network elements have you seen provide useful, I'd say at the flow level, application level, useful performance data, it doesn't have to be a pop quiz, but feel free to ping me at some point because, for now we're listening, we're customer driven, but some of these things are a little bit ahead of where a lot of the flow tools are. So we have to form a thesis and then show it to people and be a little bit iterative with that.
Do you see any use for pulling in like PX grid stuff?
I do not know what PX grid stuff is, but I love learning.
It's Cisco's platform exchange.
Is that part of ACI?
Like
or?
ICE, Cisco ICE, and all
Secure
that.
group tagging.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a protocol for exchanging secure group tags.
Secure group.
well, I mean, it pulls like NetFlow, sec events, reputation, NBAR, location, MDM info.
Oh, okay.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And what's the transport for that? Was it separate? I will take a look.
Yeah, yeah,
It hasn't been something that people have asked for.
yeah. It's like on
today.
the identity management side of things. I can
Oh,
just
okay.
see
Okay, yeah.
how
Yeah. So
More data.
what do they call it? VX?
PX grid.
PX grid. And then what's the endpoint flow called from the Cisco VPN? Is that VX flow or something like that? The answer is, broadly speaking, user identity is definitely something you want to be pulling in because,
Yeah.
especially on the security side, knowing the IP address is nice, but who is the user? And when we say user, we don't mean social security number, we mean a token that maps to it. So DHCP logs, 802.11x, other sources.
It's a publisher subscriber kind of thing, PX grid. So
Okay, so it's out of
subscribe
band.
to a publisher. And,
Okay.
yeah, so
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
interesting.
Yeah.